My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. I'm your host, Rick Clemons, and I am so glad that you're here with me today. I know that there's a lot going on the planet, but one of the things that I find always interesting is how do you just own what it is you do? How do you just own who you are in the world? How do you find those spaces to help other people through your work? I mean, I love that I get to be a podcaster and be a life coach and talk to people about very intimate stuff. And sometimes I talk to them about just normal, like, hey, I really think my job sucks and I wish I could get out of it. And sometimes I get to do some really interesting conversations like the one we're about to have today. My guest is very well known down under because, well, he is a sex worker who actually has fought for the rights to decriminalize the sex work life in Australia. And he's proud to say that's what he does. He's proud to help other people embrace that you can be older and be a sex worker. And I'm so excited that Matthew Roberts is joining us today to talk about, well, a perspective that a lot of people would go, oh, that's just not right. That's just not right. Well, I'm here to say, however you do what you do in life, it's just right for who you are and how you want to be in the world. So Matthew, I'm really happy you're here with us today and talking about all these things that you've learned and why you've fought so hard for the kind of work that you get to do in Australia. So thanks for being here, buddy.
Well, Rick, thanks for having me. And I can't think of anyone better to talk to about sex work than you.
Oh, what? No, I'm kidding. No, I get it. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty sex positive guy. I don't decriminalize anybody who wants to do this work. I think everybody gets to do their work the way they want to do it. I've never been a stiff prick, so to speak, about, oh my God, that's so gross. I want people to do what they want to do. And I think there's a piece of this that is actually helpful to people. So let's kind of talk like, when did it start for you? What was the driver behind like, hey, I'm going to be this in the world? Because this isn't all you do. I mean, there's a whole nother side to your life, but like what brought you to this moment where like, hey, if I want to get paid to have sex with somebody, I'm okay with it and I'm going to do it.
Yeah, so it started for me just over 10 years ago here in Melbourne, Australia. And I was working full-time in an office job, getting paid, well, but I really didn't like it. So I wanted to change and I moved house. I decided to follow one of my friends' footsteps and do erotic massage, sex work type work. And I was younger at the time and naive, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I got into some trouble when I started out, not knowing how to manage clients, how to assert your boundaries and your rights. And I eventually got involved in the sex workers' rights movement, which fights for the rights of sex workers. And this was important, Rick, because at the time in the state where I live in Australia, the state of Victoria, most but not all forms of sex work were a crime, right? And it was legal to work in some brothels, but there were no brothels for men. So the male sex workers were largely driven to the margins of where it was not permitted to do sex work. So I fought that campaign, and then 2022, Victoria became the 4th jurisdiction in the world, not just in Australia, to decriminalise sex work, which means that now for all male sex workers and females and other gender sex workers, it's not a crime to do that activity. It's regulated by business laws, planning laws, council laws, and workplace health and safety laws.
That's amazing. And I bet there was a shift in your own, I don't know, feelings of fear, shame, all that stuff when it's like, okay, but it's legal. This is just a business. It had to be a huge like lift to all the work that you did to help make this part of the fabric of life there, I would assume.
For me, Rick, you are absolutely right. And for me, I can't overstate how much there was a change in how I feel about the shame and the stigma there. So I stopped seeing myself as a criminal and I
Mhm.
started seeing myself as a businessman, right?
Mm.
Because that's how the law was treating me, and I have a legal background. I also came out to my family because that was a change there. I hadn't discussed it with them previously, and I also began speaking in the media openly about what I was doing, why these laws were important, and the positive effects it has on all sex workers who no longer have to fear the police and who can actually assert their legal rights if something goes wrong.
That's a big step. I mean, we have, Nevada is probably the only place in the United States, I think, that actually has legalized, brothels and stuff. But again, I don't know of any. I haven't gone looking for them, but I don't think there's any for just for men. And I find it interesting that, you know, you can embrace something like that and say that's okay, but then you can, turn around and, we just had a crazy election a couple of months ago here in the States. And it's just, the things where they cross over, it's like you'll discriminate on this, but you won't discriminate against that. It makes not a lot of sense. But as you've grown through this, because it sounded like you started, younger, erotic massage and everything, what's some of the biggest, no pun intended, guys, biggest growth things that you've learned about yourself?
What I've learned about myself is that whatever job you do, you need to know the laws that govern your work. You need to be prepared to identify your limits to your boss and your colleagues, and you need to assert your rights and stand up for what you're prepared to do and not do. And that's really important in any workplace. And for me, that has been a journey and a struggle on a daily basis to
Mm-hmm.
negotiate that. Because when you work like me independently, it's just you and the client,
Yep.
and there's no manager or boss or anyone guiding you. You have to set your own rules, your own hours. You have to decide what you'll do, when, what you won't do, at what price, who you'll see, who you won't see. So you have to manage everything, and you really need to be mature enough emotionally uh, and legally, ideally, to understand how to manage the clients. Because there's one rule, Rick, with clients that applies to all sex work clients, male or female, which is that most of them will try to get more for less.
Mm.
Constantly haggle, pushing for this, they want to stay longer, and you need to manage that, and that can be quite emotionally draining. But can I just talk, Rick, for a little bit about what I call the Trump effect on male sex work? Because this is really quite fascinating, both in
Yep.
America and here.
Yep.
I'm
Absolutely.
talking to you in November, post the election. I imagine a lot of your listeners won't be happy with the result of the fact that Trump won.
Yep.
Most Australians are surprised or even shocked about the result because
Yep.
we don't understand what's going on. But there are two effects, and one was the 2 days after Trump won, and I'm now in my 40s, so I'm not as young as I used to be, was my busiest, most profitable day in my entire career. And that was because of Trump, because my clients told
Interesting.
me. Because I had the majority of the clients called me up and said, I really want to see you because I'm so stressed about this whole thing and I'm anxious, etc. I just want to relax. And then I had two clients in the evening that came to say, I'm so happy, I want to celebrate. So that was
Interesting.
obviously the other side. And it was a very, very busy day, right?
Hmm.
And that was really interesting. Now, I actually think in the USA where you are, I think that there's going to be a change in sex work, or sorry, male to male sex work because of Trump. And can I tell you
Hmm.
what that change is going to be and why? This is my
Absolutely.
prediction, right? Male to male sex work predominantly does not rely on demand from the gay community. Demand is coming overwhelmingly, in my case, probably about 90%, from men who identify as straight,
Yep.
partnered to a woman, or straight life with kids, traditional life. Now, we know that Trump has been pushing this hyper-masculine role and culture wars that the media always talks about. And I think that's not going to be good for men who want to be openly gay,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think generally it's not going to help them. It might hinder them or it might have no effect.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a country or a culture that drives men into the closet or discourages them from being open about their sexuality, that results in those men being more likely to actually pay for gay sex. So
I
I
can
think
see your
that there
point.
could be a financial benefit there, although not a benefit overall for the whole country, of course.
Right. Right. Well, and it is. It's an interesting thing where so many things will start to go under the covers. I mean, if I was just relying purely on my gay coming out coaching, I could see that business kind of drop. But on the flip side, I could also see it begin to pick up because guys want to talk about, how do I navigate my secret life? How do I ensure that I show up this way in this place and this way in the other place? So for me, it will become a values thing for me. Like, okay, do I want to work with those kind of guys? Because they could be somebody who's like going to tell me to my face, you're a fucking faggot. And I don't, but then behind closed doors, they can say, fuck me and let me, eat your ass, suck your cock, whatever it might be. So there's, there's that interesting twist. And I've been in that space before when I first started coaching, because so many of my guys were like, I'm really afraid to talk about who I am. And we were kind of like starting to ride the wave up of like, it was okay to be out and proud and all this. This will all play out. We're in that space of what will actually happen as all the world watches. I mean, I think a majority of the world right now is like, here we are a few weeks past the election at this point. I think everybody's kind of in shock. And as each day rolls, we'll see what's more. Until he's actually sitting in that chair, I don't think we can assume anything until boom, January 20th, when it's like, okay, we're in. But as Americans, we're already starting to see like, okay, wow, look at what they did today. And oh, look what they're doing now. And look, it's a crazy space. And I love your perspective. I think that's really interesting because I think it's probably very spot on. And I would assume, correct me here, Matthew, I would assume the straight guys that come to you, they're probably in relationships with women who the wife or the girlfriend's like, yeah, I'm done with sex. That's not something we need to do. Or they're not frequent. The frequency isn't there. I'm assuming that's pretty consistent in your world too.
Well, some of the cases. So when the men who identify as straight come to pay for sex with a man, which is all what my clients are doing, there are generally two categories. One is they've got a wife or a girlfriend who, for whatever reason, is no longer having a sex life. There are many reasons for that, and I respect that. But you see, Rick, you're assuming that the reason that people pay a sex worker is because they're paying for sex. I would argue that's not the case.
Oh, I
They're
agree.
paying for many things. They're paying not for sex, but for mind-blowingly great sex.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that's the difference between just going out and hooking up. You might get sex, but is it going to be high quality? Right? And they're also paying for, and depending on the country and the laws, privacy.
Yes.
If you hook up unpaid, then with some guy and you're married, they might get attached, they might get emotional, gossip gets around, all that kind of thing.
Yep.
When a client pays a male sex worker like me, it's like seeing a lawyer or a doctor, in the sense that there's that rock solid confidentiality there that it never comes out, and it might not surprise you that I know a lot of male sex workers here in Australia, and without mentioning names, there are some high profile individuals in politics, business, and the sporting area that are frequent customers, and that's just how it works.
Well, that's just how it works pretty much everywhere. I mean, there's so many different nuances, because I have a friend of mine that is a sex worker in New York City, and he and I have had these conversations over and over again. And he goes, and sometimes they're just there for the companionship. They just like being there for the companionship because it's different than what they have at home. He goes, most always involves some sort of really amazing sex, or sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just, he has one client who's like, he just wants to be naked with a man. That's it. He doesn't want anything else. He just wants that. But where else can he do it? He can't call up his buddy and say, hey, Joe, could you just come over and let's strip and be naked? And, he doesn't feel he has that freedom, right? And it's such an interesting thing to hear these different versions from like you and my friend Alan and others, that it's like, I've talked to many porn stars too. And they're like, there's, porn stars who are straight up, straight. And they really do get off on, doing the gay sex scenes. They really enjoy it, but they don't want it with a guy. They don't want a relationship with a guy for sure. They still want the woman and the tatas and the vagina and everything else. It's interesting to me that you have found your way And I think this is one of the things that's a big thing for sex workers that most people don't get. You found your way to just be a business person and be of service. That's it. No emotion, no nothing else. And some people just, they can't wrap their head around it. I find it like, that sounds like it's a business deal to me. It's a business deal, said and done. How did you have to do some shifting in your own head to get from, erotic massage, keeping it separate, not getting, I mean, how do you keep from getting like the emotion piece tied into when you're working with a client?
Yeah, so it definitely is a business, Rick, and I treat it like I love small business rights. You know, I've lobbied politically and in the legal world for small business rights, you know, financial rights, consumer rights. I have a background in bookkeeping, so I'm really good at managing money and doing the finances. I pay tax, right? I even take card payments, Rick, on a POS machine, right? And
Yep.
I had to fight a landmark Australian court case against two financial companies for the right to be able to use this because I was working legally there. So, but in terms of psychologically, when you're meeting clients, how do you manage that? So it's like any job. When you are a coach, when you're working in McDonald's or when you're a nurse and you're interacting with people in person every day, which is what you do, right?
Yep.
You you can enjoy your work and you can respect the patient or the client that you're dealing with, but you flip mentally into work mode, right? My role here is to assist, is to service,
Yep.
or is to advise, right? And so that's no different from what I do. There's nothing wrong with having a fabulously good time when you're at work, and I do a lot of the time with my clients, right? And it's not just about the sex, it's also about the counseling and the coaching to a certain extent, because a lot of my clients are struggling with their sexual identity, sexual
Yep.
orientation. A lot of them are dealing with their concept of age and, you know, losing their virginity to men at a later age. Some of them are 70 by the time they come to see me, and they're losing their virginity because um, you know, they've been wanting to try with men for a long time. They're dealing with, some of them have got health issues, heart, you know, knees, legs. I do see disabled clients, blind, deaf, wheelchair, cerebral palsy, you know, whatever it is.
Yep.
So they bring lots of things to the table, as well as emotionally, they could be dealing with grief in their life, right? And a lot of them just want excitement. They want to have a really, really good time. And so you have to be able to put yourself in a headspace where you're able to provide that.
So how would it work for you? I mean, are you in a relationship personally or no?
No.
No. How do you think that would work? Have you ever
Well,
crossed that bridge in your own mind? If you had like a relationship, I know how I would answer it, but I'm curious how you would answer
yeah, I think honesty is really important in
it.
these situations. I think for a lot of people, it would not be an easy conversation to have if they were, you know,
Yep.
dating there. I think honesty is really important. So that's the foundation, I think, for any relationship there.
Mhm.
Um, for a lot of sex workers, they really struggle with the idea of dating, because there are a lot of people out there, both men and women, who say they're okay with it, with dating a
Yes.
sex worker, but in practice, when they try it, they weren't really honest with themselves when when they said they were comfortable with it. And when push comes to shove, they in the back of their mind, they kind of wish that the person would stop doing it or would reduce the hours.
Mhm.
And if you're really okay with it, you should, I think, even be supporting your partner in what they want to do. So I acknowledge that's a really tough conversation, but in my mind, and I know you've spoken about this on your podcast, which I have listened to, quite a few of them,
Mm.
honesty and openness in any relationship, I think, is really important.
Well, but it's the same as a conversation about, okay, yes, we're gonna have an open relationship, but if you don't take it beyond like what's the honesty and everything around that, then somebody who says, okay, I work with a lot of people, and if you've listened, I think you're kind of alluding to some of those conversations on my podcast. It's like, did you really have the conversation or not? You may have thought you had the conversation, but you didn't have the conversation to its fullest. And the thing is in all of these realms, it's not a one and done. It continues to unfold. I mean, somebody could say, yes, Matthew, I'm totally comfortable with you being a sex worker when we meet. And as they get to know you, and then it's like, well, how do I live with this day to day? Now it's a daily thing. Like, oh, I've got a client. Well, I mean, it's kind of like me. I've got a client. I got to, I come and I do like I told my husband right before we started recording this, like, I've got a podcast. It's not as quite as intimate as like, hey, I got a client. I'm going to have sex with this client. But there's these agreements, and too often people don't understand the agreement is the key to the whole thing. But even once you have an agreement, things will change with time. So you have to renegotiate, and I don't know. I mean, you're going to do this work. You're going to do this work. I don't think anybody should go, oh, you can't do this work. It's like, hey, if this is your work, this is your work. There
It is,
might come a time that it won't be your work. But for
that's
now, it
right,
is.
And I took a break over COVID because, workplaces were restricted at that time. So I did take a break for a couple of years over COVID. And I took a break prior to that. But Rick, I think one of the points that you make that I think is so crucial, particularly to sex work, is negotiating what's going to happen, right? So when you live in America, where a lot of the states, as you say, it's actually illegal to certain extents, the law does not recognize what we call contract law. So here in Victoria, where I live, here's how great it is legally for sex workers, right? We can openly discuss what we're doing. Whereas in places where it's illegal, you have to pretend it's just a massage. Then when the client comes to you, so they know what they're getting, which is a benefit to the client. They want to know, okay, they want to see the full pictures, right? Not just face, but other stuff. They want to have a description of what exact services are on offer. And as you know more than I do, Rick, in the gay world, there's a lot of stuff that you can do in the bedroom, right? Potentially. They want to know, are you top, bottom, versatile? Do you kiss? All that kind of stuff. They want to know what's the price for each one. And where we have laws that criminalize sex work, they often criminalize the advertising of it. And that means that the client's not getting that. And so you're not having that clarity. And then when it comes to a physical encounter, there could be more likely pressure or abuse because there's no clarity there. Then when you actually go to text the client, because usually it's negotiated via text message or email, you can actually lay out where it's legal, where I am, lay out the price, the address, what's going to happen, and even the payment method. Where it's illegal in parts of America, a lot of people don't do that because they're worried that's going to be evidence against them that could assist the police. Right? But over here in Victoria, so in case something goes wrong, I don't want to be caught. I've got to keep it all underground for both the client and the worker. It's there. Over here, if you have that contract and even a text message to the contract, the service is provided and then they don't pay, you can sue. And that has happened here in Victoria. Right? A sex worker was able to sue the client for the unpaid fees. But even more, Rick, if we talk about criminal law, that's now on the sex worker's side in this state. This Parliament has redefined rape. So consent laws are redefined in a way that is very unique to sex work, where what it now says is, if there's an agreement between a client and a sex worker for sexual services to be provided, and if those sexual services are provided and then the client doesn't pay for whatever reason, then that's rape. That's what the laws now say. So we've seen a man getting arrested elsewhere in Australia for owing tens of thousands of dollars of money to female sex workers. This was on the news recently, and he was actually charged with rape. Wow. He'll face the court soon. So this is what it looks like, Rick, in a part of the world where the Parliament and the culture actually does support sex workers largely and has given them those amazing legal rights. And we're now just beginning to see those legal rights actually asserted in the courts.
But I can't help but think that there's still got to be some contingents within Australia, the crazies, conservatives that are like, this is still not right. Do you still see that backlash?
You do still have individuals and even small political parties who are Christian conservatives, as you say, and you've got individuals who vote that way. That is right. But sex workers, by organising together in a wide range of advocacy and support groups, have succeeded since the 1970s, because that's how long we've been fighting for this here, right? We've been fighting and we've succeeded, not in all parts of Australia, because it's like in America. There's 8 jurisdictions, states and territories, and each one has its own sex work laws, and they're all completely different. Some are great, like here in Victoria. Others, everything is illegal, right? So it's completely different. And so, but largely, sex workers have changed the narrative. They've worked in the media, and they've made a evidence-based argument that when you reduce sex workers' rights and their access to health and safety and police, you actually make their lives more dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's pretty
Yep.
it's pretty common sense, isn't it, Rick? Right?
Very common sense.
When you remove the threat of criminal penalty against sex workers just for doing their job, they have increased access to health and safety, to STI testing. HIV rates are more likely to go down, right? Police reports are going to go up about what's going on. Violence against sex workers will go down. Now, it does not mean, Rick, and I really want to be clear about this. If you work at McDonald's or you work, as a truck driver, your workplace is not going to be violence free. There aren't going to be accidents, or there aren't going to be bullies, or people doing the wrong thing. And it's
Right.
no different here. It just means that we have the optimal laws to be able to address problems when they arise. It's not
Right.
perfect.
But it's similar to when the AIDS epidemic began. Much of the reason it wasn't because gay men were, the way they wanted to say, oh, it's all the gay men who are loose with their sex and sex lives and everything. They feared so many of us into that space that then we wouldn't show up and get tested, which just caused it to become worse because we don't want anybody to see us, want anybody to know this, right? I mean, I was not right in the midst of it, but I mean, when I did come out in 1999, I still remember going through like, let's get tested and, call, and here's the, here, your number's this. And, it was not easy stuff. And it's a very interesting thing, like how when you just make something legal, then the hiding in the shame gets reduced a tremendous amount. There's no reason for it then. But as long as you say this is shameful, this is dirty, this is, against the law, all this sort of stuff, well, then lots of things. It's like prohibition. When alcohol is told you it's, illegal and everything, then it's a whole lot more hidden. And then people do stupid things because they're hiding. And then that's when so many of these dangers happen. But people don't seem to embrace, like, wait, this is the wicked cycle versus do it with the right cycle and things are actually better.
And so I have told a lot of my clients, here's I specialize in clients, Rick, who come from non-English speaking backgrounds. Okay. And in some parts of rural Pakistan, they don't even know what a condom is.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell them all this stuff. I educate them. One of them didn't even know what the word blowjob meant, the word in English. So
Yeah.
I educate them. They're not getting this education from anywhere else.
Nope.
So sex workers are also educators in this space, right? And to respond to some of the look, let's just be fair to Trump supporters for 1 second, okay? I believe a lot of Trump supporters are probably quite okay with porn and gay stuff and sex work. They probably are, right? Whether laws change in a certain way at the government level is another question. But I think a lot of people are actually quite okay with this topic. Where you have what I call the haters, the people, the misogynists, those who hate sex workers or who want to ban it all. The best response both here and in America, and I personally do this now because I've got a lot of journalists on my phone, is as soon as they come out and they say something in public, if sex workers come out and respond really clearly in the media and in public, on social media and in the mainstream media, and say, no, we are sex workers, we are actually doing this work, and here's what we think, that really, really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, silence never helps. If you're silent, it never will help the cause in any cause. It's there's a lot of conversations I've had over the last few weeks since, he won the election. And, I have certain friends like, yeah, I'm just going to be a little quieter. I'm like, okay, you can do that. That's your choice. But being quieter doesn't necessarily do the job. You've got to be ready to like say what you need to say, but say it in a way that's like, here's my truth. This is what is. And I think a lot of people are afraid to like stand in that space. And I get it. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. I just encourage, like, the more power you have with your voice and your actions is when you use your voice and your actions for good to show that this is the way and this is the way forward. So I'm curious for you. Do you only work with men? Period. I mean, is it only men? Okay.
Yeah. So I identify as gay, and it's only working with men.
Well, and I feel like that's a big thing where some people are like, okay, well, then he's gay, so this is why he's doing this. No, that's not just why he does this. Then, oh, he's only helping gay men. And you brought this up earlier. I'm so glad you brought it up. It's not, gay men aren't paying for this most of the time. Gay men know how to go, if they want this, they know how to get this without paying for it. Now, some, I will say, and this is probably what you would agree with, I believe at some point there's older gay men who may pay for it, because that's the only way, we have the whole gay getting older sort of thing that happens too. But I don't know, there's a lot of older gay guys. I'm like, wow, you're with that young guy and you're not paying him to be with you. Good on you. So there's still, the gay guys can figure out how to do this. The majority of it is those that are hiding, And even in my coaching practice, I get the hidden ones all the time, not for sex, but the ones who want to talk about, I don't know how to navigate being gay. I don't know how, and I've lost many a client because they're like, well, you can't charge my credit card. I'm like, well, that's kind of how this goes down. Don't know what to tell you. This is how I get paid. Either way, even if you paid me through PayPal, or, I mean, I've never gotten paid through Venmo, but I'm like, you still have to explain to your spouse, like, where's this 150 to upwards of $300, depending on how you're coaching with me. You got to explain where that money went. So it really doesn't matter if it doesn't say who it was for. You're still explaining the number. So it's always interesting.
And Rick, I was just going to say that here in Victoria, we're now seeing one of my clients told me that he saw me for the first time recently,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, you know what, my doctor told me to book a sex worker.
Wow.
His long-term doctor, who he'd been seeing, and it was about physical and mental issues or things like that, said, look, I think that you should consider doing this. And then he ended up finding me on the internet, because there's obviously many ads out there, found me, and he booked me. Another client who again was new to me said that his psychologist referred him.
Interesting.
So where it's been decriminalized in the way that it has here, you can actually have, for those medical professionals, I suppose even coaches maybe, who knows, who don't fear themselves getting prosecuted, because they can refer a patient or a client to a service if they believe that that service is legal, legitimate, and could be potentially beneficial to their client in their current circumstances. So that's another change we're seeing, is that when you legitimize it, it kind of changes everything.
Well, it does, because it makes it more acceptable. It's just acceptable. It's like, I hate to always coin the phrase, like, if you don't want to be gay, then don't be gay. It's kind of, you don't want to be with a gay person, you just don't be with a gay person. I mean, it's not that difficult. You don't want to marry a gay, then don't marry gay. I don't know, but I think it is this interesting space. A good friend of mine's a psychologist, and he's one of the best known sexologists in the US. And he and I have talked about this numerous times. He goes, the problem is that even if somebody's, I'm going to put it in your world, even if a straight guy is having sex with a gay sex worker or a male sex worker, it doesn't necessarily mean he's gay. He's just enjoying the pleasure of sex with a man. But people get so hung up on this, like, as soon as you do this, oh, that makes you gay. No, what makes you gay is you're gay and you want to have sex. You want to have a relationship. You want to live a life with somebody else who is a man. I hate to say it, yeah. Guys are guys. If they can get off with a guy, they'll get off with a guy, but that doesn't, and it's always interesting. I always am so interested in the ones that, like, well, I do everything but kiss. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? That's cool. That doesn't work for me. So bye-bye. But I'm sure you get those, right? Do you get those in your sex work, where it's like, no kissing?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, the number of, for me, and I've been openly gay since I was, around 18, so pretty much my whole adult life. So I personally do struggle with some of these guys and their what I call lame excuses. So can I give you just a few, Rick? Okay?
Absolutely.
I'm not gay. The massage was gay. Okay.
Uh-huh.
It was just a massage, therefore it doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
There was no kissing. So, so they think if they don't kiss, then that doesn't count. Oh, it was just an appointment over lunchtime break at work, right? Or, I don't dress or act out, like just so many different things, and I think the problem is, if you think about the fact that, I mean, what I've learned the most from this job, Rick, is I didn't realize how much stigma there still is around being male to male attracted or gay
Yep.
or bisexual, whatever you want to call it, right?
Hmm.
Because I would argue it, there would have to be some level of stigma there because we've just got so many men who are still in the closet,
Hmm.
bisexual, gay, straight, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that that is there and my work every single day I'm reminded of that um, tells me that people aren't open about it for a reason. There's a
Yep.
reason that they feel that they can't talk about it. And I
Well,
think
of
we need
course
to
there
think really
is.
hard. I mean, naturally, and there's so many men, as you say, particularly the ones who pass as straight, who are living that straight life there.
Hmm.
So I've been really shocked and at just how many men that we see in everyday life who've got this double life and are
Hmm.
very secretive about it. And that's not being discussed in our society, both either in America or in Australia.
One of the most interesting conversations I ever had going into helping somebody begin their journey coming out. He said, because I asked him, I said, well, what do you feel most shame around seeing yourself as being gay? And he got really quiet. And he said, well, I didn't know how I'd explain to some of my buddies that I come much more when I'm with a man than I am with a woman. I'm like, okay, that's your biggest concern, but it actually kind of made sense. Like, you imagine being in a group of heterosexual guys, like, oh, talk about the best cum you've ever had, like what the best ejaculation you ever had. You think you're going to tell a story about the best one I ever had was with a guy with my dick up
Yeah.
his ass or down a guy's throat or like standing over him and, whatever, most guys would go, I couldn't admit to that because then they'll think I'm gay. Well, maybe you are gay, or maybe it's like you just enjoy the animal magnetism of being with male energy and it actually turned up the crank. But
Yeah.
it's just such a stigmatized thought that it's just, it's just so interesting to listen to it and to understand that what could the planet be like if all of this was accepted? They just accepted it.
I know.
People are just
I know.
people, you know?
Yeah. Because Rick, the way I always talk to, and I've been into the parliament, I convinced, all of our political parties to get on board with a bill that passed to decriminalize sex work with a really large majority. So I have these discussions all the time with police, government officials, regulators, everyone else. And here's what I say to people. We have a lot of problems in the world at the moment. We have wars overseas, we have inflation, we have economic issues, cost of housing, employment issues, violence against women. There's so many big problems in the world, real problems. Do we
Mm-hmm.
really want to be spending a huge amount of police resources arresting consenting adults in private,
Yes.
whether gay or whether sex workers?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And the ultimate answer was no. We had an entire police unit disbanded here in Victoria, the one that was doing the arresting all the people in the sex industry.
Hmm.
Right? That unit doesn't exist anymore. Now, the
Wow.
police still do. And Rick, I want to make I do want to make a really important point for your North American listeners, because I know that the debate around sex work there is quite different from the debate over here, right? And
Yep.
in the USA, there's a lot of discussion about human trafficking and sex slavery. Okay, that's a big contentious issue when it comes to sex work. A few things I would say about that. In Australia, most forms of human trafficking occur outside the sex industry,
Mm.
right? It does occur, but it's less than other, industries where it occurs, like farming or cleaning or other areas.
Yep.
Secondly, when you decriminalize sex work, as we've done here in Victoria, you actually keep in place powerful anti-trafficking laws. They
Mm.
were in place in Australia nationwide. They are still there. And the penalty is decades in jail. It's up there with murder,
Wow.
right? And we still have a well-coordinated federal police unit that specializes in human trafficking. And when you allow everyday sex workers like me to be able to report things to the police, more easily without fear of being prosecuted, that actually gives the police more intelligence, more information, and that actually makes it easy for them to crack down on human trafficking where it occurs.
Mm-hmm.
You see? And we have not seen an increase in the size of the industry since the laws changed. We haven't seen more human trafficking occurring since the laws came into place. And we haven't seen any evidence of the public being impacted negatively through, amenity impacts or noise or crime or anything. So all of those doomsday predictions that so many of the conservatives and the Christians would remind us of just haven't happened here.
Right. Well, they won't happen in most of the things that they want to do. That's the thing.
And so I stand against human trafficking, as I'm sure everyone would, right? Whether in the sex industry or anywhere else. We do not allow that. The law doesn't allow it. We never call for that. Sex work for under 18s is still a crime everywhere in Australia. It always has been, whether for the sex worker or for the client, right? Coercion, debt bondage, force, violence, threats, any of that kind of stuff is not actually sex work. It becomes trafficking. So the number one thing that we can do, Rick, when we think about sex work is to to distinguish between consenting adults engaged in sex work, which is what I do, versus the very, very serious crime of human trafficking, which is legally and morally a completely different thing.
I love it. I got to say, Matthew, I'm so glad that you reached out to me, because I probably would have never found you to have this conversation. And it's such an enlightening perspective on, how you can see things differently. So I have one last question for you, because I think this is one that's probably on a lot of people's minds. Like, okay, so you're 40, some years old. Is there still a need when you're 40? There obviously is, because you're getting the work. Some people would say, I think this is a young man's job. Fill us in on that perspective too.
Well, my answer is the same that a lot of my friends say. I will be here happily seeing clients for as long as they're demanding me. As long as there's demand and I'm still getting those calls, I'll still happily be helping out and how I can, because I love my job.
Right. And I think it's a really interesting perspective, because then you start to throw ageism into the whole mix, and it can be a whole nother conversation. There are people who will always want to be with an older guy. There are people who want to be with a younger guy. There are guys that just want to be with a guy. They don't care what their age is. Same thing with women. So it's such an interesting thing. And then when you look at, again, how society has crafted all these constraints about, oh, well, he's got a younger guy or she's got a older guy. Oh, gold digger and da. It's like, that's all societal constructs. What about just people happen to be attracted? That's it. They find that more attractive, and that's what they go for, It's no different than I'm very attracted to guys with furry chests. That doesn't mean I wouldn't be with a guy who isn't, but if I have my preferences, that's what I would go be with. If it was a guy with a nice furry chest, I'd be all over that. Just the way it is. So, well, Matthew, thank you so much for sharing and everything. And we will have ways to contact you on all the show pages, or find out more about. Most of it's on Twitter, right? That's where you keep most of your stuff at this point. Very good. And, again, thank you for sharing and just showing us this other way to look through a lens of, this doesn't have to be shameful. It can actually just be business. I hate to say it, business as usual. It is just business as usual. It's that simple. Well, thank you, sir, again. I appreciate you. And guys, just let this whole conversation show you different ways to be with yourself and to be with things that make you maybe feel ashamed or uncomfortable, and just realize what Matthew just shared with us is one piece of the world that causes a lot of stuff around shame and guilt and all this, but you can take a lot of what he just shared with you and put it into other constructs of life and go, why do I feel shame about this? Why do I feel uncomfortable? What if we looked at things differently? It's all about giving us, as gay men over 40, the beautiful insight of what we've learned. Keep looking at things through different lenses. So thanks for being here, guys. Thank you again, Matthew. And everyone, go out, have a great week, a great day. And remember, just keep being your beautiful, amazing, unapologetic 40+ gay man. Take care.
That's a wrap for 40+ Gay Men, Gay Talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40+ Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.